What's up, guys, and welcome back to the channel where we learn, do, and talk about photography until we're sick of it. Today we are going to get wide. We're going to talk about panoramas. I rarely get the chance to photograph panoramas. You've probably noticed that on this channel because where I live, it's not really a justified photographic technique. We don't have a lot of wide sweeping vistas, but today we're definitely going to check out one such opportunity. So I'm here at Split Rock Lighthouse State Park on the north shore of Lake Superior in Minnesota. It's a park that's famous for both a very photogenic historic lighthouse, but also great overlooks from which you can observe the gorgeous sights of the scenery around the north shore of Lake Superior. So if you're new to panoramas or you haven't had a chance to try it, stay tuned. I think you'll find something enjoyable and useful in this preparatory walkthrough. If you're just looking for a great place to practice, let's go check out the location. Man, it's just a heck of a location to enjoy a little, what I like to call exciting downtime or what. I'm going to give you like a full, almost 360-degree tour of what I'm looking at here at this outlook as a way of sort of walking you through what I'm thinking with this composition. We've got this incredible view out to Lake Superior, right? Just as far as the eye can see. And for a Midwesterner like me to see a water level horizon, very inspiring to be able to feature all of this stuff on the shoreline, all these little details, right? And hopefully get some color reflecting in the water. That's really the point of the photo here. Reddit tells so much about this location. But the reason I thought to shoot a panorama is panning over here more to the right, we have all these other details that we couldn't see from a shoreline composition like this. Beginning with these trees, these beautiful, they're something like aspen trees. I'll put the information, the actual species of tree information here in the slide because I'm not from this area and I'm not familiar with these tree species. But all of these gorgeous trees. And then as a sunset shoot, right, of course, coming back over to the bluff tops and as a sunset shoot, enjoying also the opportunity to see the sunset. Okay, so that's the scene on the camera. I'm going to give you a little bit closer view to the camera itself so we can walk through the operation to catch the ideal panoramic settings. Okay, one of the most important preparatory things we can do here when mounting the camera, and first when setting up the tripod, is to make sure that everything is level. Now this is complicated, especially for landscape photography, typical landscape photography setups, because we have so much articulation. There is leveling the tripod, right? We're looking here at the base of the tripod, which has a bubble level on it. And that can help me get the legs of the tripod level from this, right, from the parallax of this. This looks unlevel. But so making sure to look at it from the top down will give you an accurate view to this bubble level. Make sure the tripod itself is level. What complicates that is that your tripod very likely sits on top of a ball head like this. And so there is an extra articulation there that needs to be made level. So I always check sort of like end to end level by using the camera's built-in level and panning across the whole composition to make sure that it is approximately level from end to end. So you see there's a slight variation of level from one end to the other, but it's so slight that if I just barely bump the camera, it'll come in green. If you're not familiar with this type of camera level, when the indicator is green, that tells me I've got a level horizon composition. So that's helpful in all kinds of situations, but it's especially helpful here where keeping the horizon level is going to help us get a nice straight panoramic. It's important to notice that's going to crop in a little bit. So I also want to make the photo a little wider than intended. Okay, so Next, we want to make sure that the camera is in manual mode because if we're shooting in an automatic mode, it's going to be varying exposure as we pan the camera. So I will set the exposure in manual. I'm going to expose it just like I would any scene, right? So I'm going to set the desired aperture. In this case, we have some stuff pretty close to the camera, so I'll set it at f10. I'll verify that that's the adequate depth of field later, right? The ISO at 100, and then I'm going to continually expose this to the left, so I'm getting about a 13th of a second here without clipping anything off the right side of the histogram. Now, normally I would push this a little closer to the edge, but there's a little wind, so I don't want to have too slow of a shutter to make sure that there's not a lot of subject motion of these plants and things that are here in the foreground and throughout the photo. I will then pan the camera again left and right and make sure that those exposure settings are still accurate. So moving here to the right did push the histogram quite a bit and almost uncomfortably close to the edge. So I'm going to take this for a 15th of a second, and that is good. We're also going to have to set the white balance manually. So in this case, I'm just going to make sure that it's set to 5500 Kelvin. If this is set to auto white balance, then the camera is also going to be changing color as you pan. That also means we need to get focus set manually. So identifying maybe this tree here, I'll get this where you can see it. Some of these closer trees, right? These are not right in front of the camera, but also not at a point where the camera would be focused to infinity. I'll focus on some of these trees here and then put the lens into manual focus, right? So now everything is set manually and nothing can change from exposure to exposure, white balance, exposure, and focus. And lastly, I'll verify that that is the desired aperture and focus point by magnifying in on the very far foreground. Engaging the depth of field preview. And verifying acceptable sharpness, and then repeating that process into the background. Okay, I've set up my operation for success here. That means that now the most fun part is also going to be the easiest part. Putting the camera to get the leftmost extreme part of the photo. I do have the shutter set up on a 2-second delay to minimize shake, get the exposure. Unlock the panning axis. It's important to lock the panning axis on the tripod head for each exposure. Capture it, unlock, pan, lock, expose, and we're going to repeat this process times however many exposures it takes to capture the full range of the scene with a little bit of overlap in images. All right, quick discussion before we pack it up. This was super fun. I would, normally probably not shoot this as a panoramic. It's by far my preference to even bring like a telephoto lens up to a Vista like this and pinpoint details, and I find those are usually much more effective photos. But something about this scene, the variety of scenery, it was just too expansive of a story to tell in only close-up photos, and so I thought it was beneficial to this scene, and I also wanted to share the technique with you. So that's why we got a panoramic today. This isn't the first Vista I've shown off on this channel. I believe it is the first time I've demonstrated a stitched panorama. Second, it would be more conventional to make a panorama like this with the camera in the vertical orientation, and so then you would have a taller field of view. And so then you would even have a less of a strip panorama, because when I show you this, the result of what we made here is going to be a very thin strip panorama. But I don't have with me on this trip an L bracket that will hold the camera in the vertical orientation on top of the tripod. Okay, now you can see it. So what most of you would do, and myself included, what I would do if I wanted to take a vertical shot in this situation on the tripod is to mount the camera in the ball head like this, right, and rock the ball head over to the side. The axis that you want the camera to pan around, the anchor point, you want that to be as close as possible to the plane of the sensor, and that means you have less directional perspective shifts, so that you have less cropping and a more natural looking perspective later. So if I were to make a panorama with the nodal point way out here and doing this extreme rotation around the tripod head, we would get a panorama that was like really tall on one side and tapering down, right? And there would be either we would have to crop off, we would both have to crop off a lot, and the perspective would be very strange looking. So that is why we did horizontal orientation, even though it gave us this kind of unusual long strip panorama, which again probably wouldn't have been my first preference. It's a compromise that I made to use to get the best result possible with the equipment that I had. There are special ball heads that you can, well, not ball heads, but special panning tripod heads that you can use, which will maintain the camera nodal point as the rotation point. Okay, I think that wraps it up. I hope you guys enjoyed the location. There's a lot to photograph here. Like I said, the main draw of this park is the historic lighthouse, and I've photographed that many times. I think this is my 4th time visiting this location. So I try to do something a little different every time I come besides just seeing that, because there's so much here that you could easily make this a weekend getaway. And so visiting some of the vistas is often one of the things that I'll undertake. And I thought this one was great. I hope you guys enjoyed it too. Be sure to give this video a thumbs up. I welcome you to subscribe to the channel also. The next stop on my trip is towards the Superior National Forest and the Boundary Waters canoe area wilderness. I don't think I'll get to canoe on this trip, but definitely beautiful sights to check out. So if you want to see that, be sure you subscribe, and I'll see you next time. But until I see you then, you guys keep an eye out and a foot forward, and thanks for watching. Bye.